So this evening I saw Riot on Sunset Strip, and I'm going to give my thoughts on it. This is a 1967 movie. According to Wikipedia, it's a counterculture era exploitation movie. They also classify it as a hippie exploitation movie. It is loosely based on the real Sunset Strip curfew riots, which I don't know a lot about, but according to Wikipedia, took place in 1966 and were riots about a curfew on teenagers, which was in Sunset Strip in LA, I believe. Yeah, West Hollywood, California, which were unpopular with the young people. So there was a demonstration and riot about those. And then this is one of those things. Sorry, a little bit of a tangent here. I think it was one of those things which was a really big deal at the time, but then I think it's been largely forgotten since then, right? Like when I was growing up, and I grew up about 25 years after I was growing up about 25 years after the 60s. I remember hearing about the Berkeley free speech movement, the Chicago 1968 demonstrations, Kent State, People's Park demonstrations, I don't know, a handful of other things maybe. The Sunset Strip thing did not seem to be something people talked about, but anyways, it was apparently a big deal at the time. Wikipedia, if you go to their Sunset Strip curfew riots, has a whole bunch of things about their cultural impact. It was a bunch of songs at the time or something like that. Some celebrities were involved. So after being a big deal at the time, this movie got rushed into production to capitalize on it. The idea was to get it out as quickly as possible, Riot on Sunset Strip, to have a youth culture movie that was ripped directly from the headlines. And it's, I think, largely regarded as a terrible movie, but, a timepiece, a cultural oddity, a blast from another era, and is interesting in that regard. So, why in the world am I watching this movie? Yeah, I don't want to ramble on about this for too long, but I should probably explain why I watched this. The basic reason actually is I used to watch a lot of movies, and I really haven't watched very many movies at all since having kids. In an ideal world, I would like to be watching more movies just because I think it's part of being cultured. Reading books and watching movies. I mean, I know you could say that watching movies are a waste of time, but I think that, compared to the way a lot of us spend our time these days, which is just scrolling on the internet or watching YouTube videos or stuff like that, movies which have a coherent beginning, middle, and end, I think seem to be more cultured now than they did before. I'm rambling. Sorry, I said I wasn't going to go on a tangent like this, and here I'm going. In an ideal world, I would like to be more cultured by watching more movies, reading more books, and talking about them. In practice, I find myself quite busy these days and rarely have the time. But I had time tonight, so I thought I would try and watch a movie and talk about it. And my primary method of watching movies is just seeing what's on YouTube, because I don't have a DVD player, I don't have cable, I don't have Netflix, I don't have anything like that. So as I'm sure you're aware, there's a bunch of old stuff on YouTube. There's not really there's not a lot of new movies on YouTube. Certainly not there legally, and even illegally, it seems to get taken down rather quickly, doesn't it? But yeah, you can find old movies on YouTube. So I was looking around, just trying to see what old movies were on YouTube that I hadn't seen yet, or even that I had seen and would want to rewatch. And I won't bore you with the all the movies I tried to find and couldn't find, but then I found this one, and this is a movie that I've been meaning to see for ages. When I was young, I was interested in the counterculture of the 1960s. I think, I mean, when I was young, I mean like high school, college, and even into my 20s. For a couple of reasons, I think young people are inherently interested in the youth culture movements because they're in the youth, and for those of us with interest in history, interested in the youth culture movement from eras before. But then I think certainly something that seems obvious to me in retrospect is in the 80s and 90s was the heyday of baby boomer nostalgia and mythologizing for the 1960s, and I grew up in the midst of that and was influenced by that and developed a fascination about that. And this is a movie that I think I've been vaguely aware of since high school, but never bothered to track down. And then I was searching on YouTube, and it was there. And I'll include a link in the description down below in case anybody wants to check it out. With the caveat that you never know how long that link is going to stay active. I doubt it's there legally. Like I doubt it's there with the full blessings of its copyright holders. But as of this exact moment in time when I'm recording this video, you can watch the full movie on YouTube, and I'll link to it down below. Now, as I was watching it, parts of it seemed familiar, and I thought, I've seen this before. And I thought, well, okay, maybe I saw part of it on TV once. Maybe I saw clips of it on YouTube. But I haven't seen the whole thing. And then as I kept watching and as I got all the way to the end, I thought, I've seen this before. So I have seen this before. I just must have forgotten about it. I don't know when I would have seen it before. Either it would have been in the late 90s if I saw it on cable TV, or possibly in the early 2000s when I was living in Japan. Maybe it was in a Japanese video store. So sometimes they have those odd movies like this you can find in Japan. But yeah, I'd seen it before. I know this is only of interest to me, so I will try not to talk about it for too long. But on the one hand, I was like, geez, I'm getting old and I'm losing my memory. I didn't even remember that I'd seen this movie some 20 years ago or something. On the other hand, I thought, well, okay, well, at least once I saw it, I remembered that I had seen that before. So I guess my memory is still working to some degree. And you forget things over the years. I've since 2007, I've kept a list of all the movies I've seen on my blog. So it must have been sometime before 2007. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. I had seen it before. And, the thing is, it's not a great movie. So it's one of those things that you can see as a cultural timepiece. But it's not the type of movie that anyone would need to watch more than once. But okay, I've watched it more than once now, I guess. Excuse me. Okay, so let's get into the review then. So this, I believe, was not regarded as a great movie even back in its day. It was something that was rushed to take advantage of the headlines. It was regarded as kind of a cheesy youth exploitation movie even at the time. And age has not improved it. So you wouldn't want to see this as a great movie, but you can watch it as a timepiece. And as kind of a dated melodrama, it's relatively entertaining. It's not a good movie by any stretch, but it's watchable mostly. The weak points are all the music and dancing. And it's a hippie exploitation movie. It's a counterculture exploitation movie. So I guess you have to have these, right? I mean, I guess these were why these movies got made, the whole selling points of these movies. And there's I don't know, 2 or 3 bands that appear as themselves in the movie. According to Wikipedia here, I think they're credited in the movie as well. The Standells, the Chocolate Watch Band, and I don't know. Yeah, maybe that was it. Standells and the Chocolate Watch Band, as well as a lot of general kind of 60s swinging kind of psychedelic music. Yeah, the music's not terribly good, and again, it hasn't terribly aged well. I think this style of music was obviously more popular in the 60s. Now, I enjoy classic rock as much as anybody, and I like 1960s music as much as anybody, I guess. But I think one of the things when you're listening to older music is you're listening to the best stuff that survived the ages. And in any given age, there's a lot of crap that was on the radio that just hasn't survived to become the classic rock hits of today. The stuff that gets forgotten about. So these are some of the lesser known bands singing some of the lesser known music. And the dancing is so terrible. You know what I'm talking about, right? Every time you see an older movie from the 1960s or before, they're just dancing like this. Sorry, you can't see my hands in frame, but they're just moving their hands up and down, and that's the dancing. That was the style at the time, or sometimes they're going like this. And it does look like everybody's enjoying themselves mostly, so fair enough. I had a high school teacher once who was talking about how bad the dancing was in Saturday Night Fever, John Travolta. He had a tendency to go off on tangents, which were sometimes unrelated to the exact subject of his class. But he was saying to us, it's more noticeable now that we've had people who could really dance like Michael Jackson. That when you go back and watch these movies, you see how terrible the dancing is. He was talking about Saturday Night Fever, but I assume the same thing applies to 1960s movies. I don't know. Maybe he was right, or maybe the 80s were the era where dancing became really tight, and then these old movies just look bad, or I don't know. Maybe it was just a badly produced movie. There are a few scenes in particular. The scene right at the end where the lady cop is in the club checking people's IDs, where they do not look like they're having fun. They're just kind of going like this mechanically. Now, some of that could just be because it's a low production movie. So that, there's a director on set being like, ready, action, dance. And then they just had to dance because they were being filmed. And so maybe it's just explained by being a bad low production movie. But I think that's generally true of 1970s and 1960s movies generally, right? The dancing looks really terrible. And then there's a LSD scene where this girl has LSD at a party. Somebody spikes her drink and is going through this LSD dance, and it goes on for too long, and it's not interesting. And I'm probably played much better in the 1960s to like a hippie audience, but this kind of stuff has not aged well. Now the basic melodrama is watchable. It takes a dark turn at the end, but it starts off relatively watchable. We've got the problem at the beginning is it's not quite clear who the protagonist is. So we've got this group of teenagers which likes going to the club, and they seem like a relatively good group of kids, but there's a quiet girl who they're trying to get out to go out with them, and she doesn't want to go out. And then there's the nightclub owner who's trying to keep the kids in line. And then there's the businessmen from the Sunset Strip who are complaining to the police chief about too many kids being out. And the police chief, I guess if anybody's a protagonist in this movie, it's the police chief, which I know a little bit odd for a hippie exploitation movie to center around a sympathetic police chief, but well, that's Hollywood for you, huh? He really wants to protect the rights of the kids to go out and have fun, and he doesn't want his men to have a heavy hand on them, and he wants to resist the urge of the business owners to shut down the kids. But he's just getting so much pressure from the city to crack down on these kids, and he's standing up to them and saying, no, the kids have a right to go out and have fun. If they break the law or something, we'll go after them. Yeah, and then I guess is the business owners, and the twist is the quiet girl who's being pressured by her friends to go out more is the police chief's daughter, but because they're divorced, he hasn't seen her for 4 years, and they're estranged. The movie tries to give an explanation about why he hasn't seen her for 4 years, but it's not, I don't know, maybe things were different back in that era, but it doesn't seem terribly realistic. I mean, the answer is that the mother didn't want him to see her, but, like, nowadays that wouldn't make much of a difference. You just go to court and get visitation rights or something like that. I don't know, different culture back then, or maybe just a cheesy movie. So it's a little bit confusing, kind of trying to figure out, okay, what's our A storyline, what's going on here, but it's watchable, except for all those extended dancing and music scenes, which are I mean, on one hand, the whole point of it, a hippie exploitation movie like this, on the other hand, really cheesy. But then things take a dark turn when they go to a house party. The kind of good girl has her drink spiked with LSD. Well, they're all taking LSD and she refuses to take it. So one of the guys spikes her drink. And then after this acid trip dance that she goes on, she becomes really, it's not exactly clear, but she's either really horny or she's just receptive or defenseless against the advances of the boys. And so one of them takes her up to the bedroom, and then one right after the other, they all go up to have sex with her. Yeah, I know it's for a 1967 movie, it's kind of a bit of a dark turn, this gang rape that appears, and they even use the word rape in the movie, which I thought, okay, well, because it's an older movie, they're going to avoid actually saying the word. But on the other hand, it is, Wikipedia does classify this as an exploitation movie. So yeah, it's an old movie, but I guess they were doing those kind of exploitation movies back then, huh? Right? And then her father finds out about it, and well, he's visiting her in the hospital. He overhears some of the boys who have been arrested and are kind of awaiting to be brought into a suspect's lineup, saying, "Oh, geez, what's the big deal about this? She's just some girl. Why are they making such a big deal about this?" And he loses his temper and he punches a bunch of them. And then the news media gets a hold of this, and then this causes a big protest on Sunset Strip. So, like I said, it's when I said it was very loosely based on the Sunset Strip curfew riots, I mean very loosely. Very loosely, actually, as in not at all, probably. I mean, the name is the same, Sunset Strip, but the movie does not seem like it's taking place in West Hollywood, California. The movie seems like it's taking place in a small town out in the middle of nowhere. The clubs in the downtown area just seem like a small town. The police station, it seems like it's a very small town affair. So it's not entirely clear, but I'm thinking this is made to. This isn't actually supposed to be Sunset Strip in West Hollywood, California. This is maybe Sunset Strip, Anytown, USA. Just a small town somewhere. Because the fact that the protests, the big protests at the end, are the result of the police chief punching the men who raped his daughter, as opposed to the actual curfew riots that they really were in 1966. There's a historical divergence there. So the police chief is advised not to go down there because his presence would only provoke the rioters. And they're not rioters, actually. They're just a handful of hippies. And it's probably just a handful because the movie didn't have a budget for a big crowd. But it's just a handful of them carrying signs and walking around in a circle. You know how in movies, whenever they want to show protest, they always have these people walking around in circles. I don't know if that was something that they actually did in the 1960s, but that's how it's being portrayed here. So he goes down there. One of the kids confronts him, and one of the officers grabs a kid and is going to hit him with the billy club. And then he stops it. He grabs the arm of the officer and he says, "Don't you beat that kid. Just get him in the paddy wagon and get him out of here." And then once all the kids see that, then he becomes like the hero again when he sees they're kind of standing up for him. And that's the end of the movie. I'm making this video just because I'm trying to make a project of reviewing everything I watch these days, so that I don't forget that I've seen this in another 20 years. There will be evidence of it. But really, there's not much to critique here, or maybe to put it another way, there's a lot of stuff to critique, but it's just so obvious it doesn't need a critique. You don't need me to dissect the flaws of this movie for you. It's a poorly done, cheap movie. You just watch it and you can see immediately what the problems are, and where it's overly dramatic and where it takes a dark turn. There's interesting discussions to be had maybe about kind of youth culture through the ages and what stays constant in human nature among young people and what changes. Certainly whenever you watch a movie like this or any movie about youth culture, you think to yourself, well, okay, this is the same generational conflict that's going on nowadays, more or less, with just some of the small details changed. I mean, the fact that kids want to go out and want to drink and cause trouble, and that the adults want to crack down on it. There's an interesting scene in the beginning where the cops are arresting some kids for smoking weed. And one of them makes like a big speech about how like weed's actually not that bad. It's just a public education problem. If the public was better educated and they realized that this is no more dangerous than alcohol, then it wouldn't be illegal. And the cops let him make this long speech. Actually, it's not that long. But then they say, okay, we'll just save it for the judge. I thought that was interesting that even in that time, and what is, I think, a fairly conservative movie. I mean, a movie that has the cops as the heroes. It's being acknowledged that, weed really isn't that bad. On the other hand, LSD is portrayed as something that is really bad in this movie. But then my understanding is LSD can be quite bad. I mean, I don't know. I've never actually tried it, but that it is a much harder drug or more dangerous drug than marijuana is. What else was I going to say? Sorry, lost my train of thought briefly. Oh, yeah, the protests in this movie are silly, but then they always are in kind of Hollywood movies. There must have been some sort of unwritten rule, or maybe it was a written rule, that you couldn't mention real political issues in these movies. I think censorship at the time was quite strict, kind of pressure from the governments or pressure from corporations. So that they're marching with these protest signs for a demonstration, but there's nothing about Vietnam. There's just signs like be nice to each other and rights, not fights. And they're portrayed. The hippies are portrayed here as people who just like to protest and don't have a clear cause. To be fair, there are a couple of signs that say like no war. So I guess given that the war happening at the time was Vietnam, okay, maybe that's a reference to the Vietnam War. But they're in the minority with kind of vague signs, and I think that's just because even though this was a low budget exploitation movie, I think the pressure from the government or from the big corporations at the time is if you had a movie that was explicitly mentioning the Vietnam War as an issue, you protesting against it, you couldn't get it released, couldn't get distributed, couldn't get it played in theaters. So in any 1960s movies, they always, when they're referencing demonstrations, they always have like meaningless signs that they're carrying around. It's funny, I was just earlier this week watching the Indiana Jones movie, Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. I reviewed it a couple days ago. Try and remember to link to my review in the description down below. And that movie takes place in 1969. And because it takes place in 1969, they have to have an anti-war demonstration scene. You just like have to. It's like an unwritten rule now that if there's any movie that takes place in the 60s, it has to include like a anti-Vietnam War demonstration scene. So there's, if you've seen the movie, you'll know what I mean. And Indiana Jones briefly gets mixed up with the anti-Vietnam War demonstrators. So I just, it's funny how times have changed, huh? When this was actually going on, you couldn't put it in the movie. Now, now that it's all over, every time Hollywood does any sort of movie about it, they just absolutely have to throw in some sort of cheesy scene about Vietnam War demonstrators. I mean, yeah, in Riot on Sunset Strip, they had a lot of scenes of demonstrators, but they were just demonstrating against something meaningless. And yeah, this, at the very beginning of the movie, they're demonstrating, and then they want to go into the club to demonstrate, and this causes a conflict because they don't pay the cover for the club. And I thought, okay, this is just ridiculous. I mean, you don't go into a club to demonstrate. The whole point of a demonstration is that you're out on the streets where everyone can see you, right? This is just some screenwriter in Hollywood was thinking, okay, these hippies, they like to demonstrate, right? So they all come into the club and they want to demonstrate inside the club because that's what the hippies do. Yeah. Okay, I think I'll stop rambling here. Like I said, this isn't really a movie that really needs to be critiqued. It's just a low budget, badly written exploitation movie from, how long ago was this? 70 years ago? Right, it's 2023 now. Yeah. So you don't 60 years ago. You don't need. I don't really need to critique it. Watch it for yourself. You'll see immediately what the problems are.